Hello guys, today we are going to be talking about second language acquisition theory by Crushin in 1982. Second language acquisition theory is a theory of learning that is conducted by Crushin in 1982 and assumes that humans still have the ability to acquire a second language even after the age of puberty. This theory actually contains other five hypotheses, and each provides some assumptions towards learning and teaching both a second and or foreign language. The first hypothesis is called the acquisition learning hypothesis, which distinguishes between two acts by which one can master a language. The first one is called learning, which is consciously used by learners, and this process usually occurs in formal education. It involves reading, writing, memorizing vocabulary, and so on and so forth, which means that this act is not only difficult to process, but also not sufficient unlike acquiring a language. The act of acquiring a language is much easier since one can unconsciously acquire it via exposing to the input or the context where the target language is spoken. The monitor hypothesis states that learners have the ability to monitor and observe their utterances when speaking, and even they have the ability to correct their mistakes, if they make any. Crushin differentiates between three groups of learners who monitor themselves. The first group is called underusers, are those who tend to focus on fluency rather than producing correct grammatical sentences. As a result, they make many mistakes in any conversation they are engaged in. Overusers are those who pay too much attention to their grammatical mistakes and tend to have a desire to produce perfect grammar, but they never end up being able to express their ideas fluently, because they interrupt themselves in the middle of the conversation while thinking about the rules of grammar. Optimal users are those learners who know the appropriate time to correct their mistakes in the conversation. This group tends to excel in mastering a language. In short, Stephen Krashen encourages learners to be optimal users of the language. The third hypothesis is called the natural order hypothesis, which implies that learning or acquiring a language or a second language occurs in a predictable order. This is why we find that learners start with learning the very basic structures of language, then later they embark on learning more complex grammar. Take for example, when learners begin to learn English, they first try to use simple present tense, then the present continuous, and next to the simple past, and so on and so forth. Dole and Burt are cited in Crushin in 1982. Children acquiring English as a second language also show a natural order for grammatical morphemes, regardless of their first language. This clearly exhibits that there are certain inescapable steps that every second language learner must follow. What is more, a second language acquirer picks up language in the same way that a child does, which means that adults' capacity to acquire language, as they did in childhood, does not stop at the age of puberty. The input hypothesis explains how one acquires a language in a progressive manner. A second language performer improves their level in the target language through exposing to the comprehensible input. Crushin refers to this process as I+1, meaning that learners ameliorate their language competence in a natural order whenever they learn new things. By extension, I represents one's current competence, and I+1 means that a learner's knowledge has improved further to the next stage. To Crushin, this is the only way one can acquire a language. The hypothesis indicates that one moves from a stage to the next thanks to the comprehensible input, which means that we can acquire the second language only through understanding messages while engaging with people in conversations. In the context of teaching, Stephen Krashen in 1982 says, speech cannot be taught directly, but emerges on its own as a result of building competence via comprehensible input. This quotation indicates that teachers should enhance students' competence by extensively making them understand messages first, then their fluency will automatically develop. The last hypothesis is called the affective filter hypothesis, which illustrates how our attitudes, feelings, and thoughts towards the target language determine how much we are going to succeed in the language. Crushin lists three major factors that obviously affect the progress in the second language, which are motivation, self-confidence, and anxiety. To explain, students who are motivated and self-confident while participating in the classroom tend to excel compared to those who feel shy, stressed, and anxious. This hypothesis reveals that a learner should adopt a low affective filter, which is associated with self-confidence. However, it states that learners should not have a high affective filter, which is related to anxiety, because it simply blocks the effectiveness of learning. In other words, one should be open to language in order to have a successful experience while learning. However, in the case if a student is stressed, they simply prevent internalizing the language in the LAD, which is language acquisition device.